you. I'll say that again. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chelsea Andrews, and I'm the Executive Director for Everyone Home. Thank you so much for joining us today for our governance Q&A session. This session is one where we're recording, as you know, and we will be making this information available to the public for anyone who wasn't able to join us. But the first thing we'd like to do is just welcome you to Everyone Home and provide you with a quick overview, a small video, very short video, sharing a little bit about who we are and what we do. Thank you so much for showing that. That's a little bit of who we are. You will hear a lot more detail, of course, in today's session, but we want to start and pause by trying to get to know who you are a little bit better. And we have a very quick poll just so that we can have a read of the room in terms of who's here and what your connection to the work that we're doing is. And so let's launch the poll. And if you wouldn't mind, hopefully a poll is showing up. Please share with us if you're a community member, if you're an individual with lived expertise, if you're here from a government agency or a service provider or other. All right. And so it appears that we have, oh, good. We've gotten almost 100% response rate. We'll do a quick publishing of the poll. It looks like we have a community member, an individual lived experience, which is excellent, as well as 2 representatives from the government and a service provider. So we are covering the full spectrum of potential feedback, hopefully here, and look forward to engaging and hearing your thoughts on the work that we've been doing over the last years for our governance. So wonderful, welcome. Let me start by doing a quick overview of how we will go through our day-to-day. This is a small group, so we won't be super formal. In fact, I encourage you to utilize the chat. You can use the chat to introduce who you are and how you're connected, but also feel free to utilize the chat to ask questions along the way. I will pause at different points to ask for feedback and questions, and then there'll be a full opportunity at the end of the presentation for general thoughts and feedback as well. So, of course, we started with the high-level introduction. I will walk us through the changes that are being proposed, and then we'll have our Q&A session. And so just to kind of set some context in regards to Everyone Home outside of the video you just watched, Everyone Home is a collective impact initiative, and that's a terminology that represents a group of stakeholders coming together to address a cause. And so Everyone Home focuses on bringing together all the key stakeholders. You see county agencies, the cities, nonprofit providers, community members, individuals with lived expertise, advocates, etc., really all to focus in on how do we end and prevent homelessness in our community and in our county. We're created as this collective impact initiative because the sentiment across our county is that this is a problem that we can all work together and harness our power to solve. And so bringing together the community voice allows for additional thought partnership on how we solve this issue in our community, how we leverage resources, how we influence political will to change the trajectory of homelessness in our community. And that's why the organization was created in this manner. Everyone Home, the members of Everyone Home, also are members of the HUD designated continuum of care. So HUD has created rules and requirements for each community across the United States to abide by in terms of roles and responsibility to receive funding that we receive from HUD and from the federal government every year. And it requires us to designate a continuum of care, which includes these stakeholders. And every member of Everyone Home is also a member of the continuum of care. And there's 5 key components that are required and that this organization continues to focus on per HUD rules and regulations. One is coordinated entry and ensuring that we have a housing and service system that is effective with outreach, engagement, doing assessments, and pairing individuals up with the needed resources. Also responsible for conducting at least biannually a point in time count of homeless persons, as well as doing an annual gap analysis, looking at what resources we have, what we need based on our different populations, as well as monitoring and establishing performance targets. And so you'll hear more about that later, as well as designating a homeless management information system. So you see that there are these core requirements that are a part of the HUD continuum of care requirements. So in addition to being the continuum of care, the HUD designee continuum of care, us members of the continuum of care also serve as the, as the members of the Collective Impact Initiative. And you see here that we have representatives of everyone across the county and have been able to really continue our engagement despite our virtual circumstances in terms of continuing to engage with the community with the work that we're doing. And so let me pause and ask if there are any questions based on what I've presented thus far. Okay, I will do that often just because there's a lot of information I'll be covering today and I'm not able to view the chat throughout. So I'll stop and get feedback as we move on. All
right. Chelsea, this is Nick Ming.
Oh, thank you.
Hi. So I noticed it says conduct a gap analysis.
Yes.
Is that like a hard period at the end of that, or what happens after conduct if there is a gap found as part of how?
That's a great question. You'll see that the System Impact Committee is responsible for looking at our performance, looking at the gaps, and ultimately using that information to make recommendations to our leadership board and our HUD CLC on where we should focus resources, where we should potentially modify or address policies, where we need to look closer in terms of what we can do if there's action plans needed to address those gaps. And then, as I mentioned, when we get to systems impact, we could also talk a little bit more about that. But that is definitely something that HUD expects to happen on an ongoing basis for each community. All right, I see Elena, your hand's up.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Afternoon, sorry. I have a question for the Oakland. Is the everyone is in charge for Oakland, or have you have other partners in Oakland for work with the homeless?
That's a great question, Alina. We actually have city representatives in this meeting as well. So there's the county that provides homeless services across the county, and then each city has their own department of health and human services, as well as housing and community development offices that help and provide services in their own locations. And so, but this group comes together to bring together all of those stakeholders so that we can develop a plan that works across our entire county. But there are individual resources that are in each county. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Great question. And so let me continue with the screen share and moving us forward. Okay. And so we are here because our leadership board, ultimately the body that oversees our work, has looked at our governance and over the course of the last year, looked at our current structure, which you can see is quite complex and in many instances unclear in regards to who serves in what capacity and what roles these different groups play. Because of the complexity, as well as some of the feedback that we've received from different stakeholders across the county in terms of wanting to be clearer about how they can engage and wanting to expand our governance to take into consideration all of the different stakeholders in our community, push to shift our governance to a structure that you're seeing, that you will see here momentarily. Our engagement over the course of the last year has been extensive. There was a strategic planning committee that met over multiple months. We've had Zoom drop-in sessions and meetings with different stakeholders, from cities to nonprofit providers, individuals with lived expertise. We had a community meeting in September and provided updates and received information at that time, and then ongoing meetings with the leadership board to really look at how can we improve our governance. All of these meetings have been open to the public and really are an attempt to ensure that we get it right, that we're all in alignment with how we operate our homeless response system in our community. I'm pleased to share that as a result of all of that feedback and engagement, this new structure is what is being proposed. One thing I did not say earlier is that every member of our continuum of care and our collective impact, Everyone Home, is a member that has voting rights, has the ability to come to our community members meetings, it's free membership and it's really open to the public. And so anyone who joins our meetings have an opportunity to weigh in on ultimately how we govern ourselves. So this meeting, as you all know, is to really have an opportunity to do Q&A, because at our community meeting, which is scheduled for February 2nd, our leadership board will be asking the community to vote and adopt this revised governance structure. And so this new structure is clearer and shows our leadership board front and center in the middle of our model, and with multiple committees reporting up to the leadership board. If you look at the bottom, you will see that there are 5 committees that are now represented. There was a focus on making sure that these committees are easy to understand for the public who might want to either sit on and participate in a committee and or join the committee meetings as they're occurring and know what they're about versus using the HUD lingo that we had previously utilized. And you'll see that we have now an outreach, access, and coordination committee. I will go through each of these in further slides. A housing capacity committee. This is a newly formed committee to focus on how we create more affordable housing in our community. A new committee focused on housing stability and homeless prevention, as well as a committee to ensure that we're maintaining our compliance with our HUD funding, and the committee that will look across our system as it pertains to data and our performance, and that's the System Impact Committee. You'll also notice that there's a racial equity work group that will help inform the leadership board as well as each of these committees to ensure that we're tracking how we're deploying resources, we're tracking our performance. We will be disaggregating all of the data based on various demographics so that we can ensure that our system is equitable, as well as hold our own selves accountable whenever we notice that there are disparities in our system. And so this committee will work to help inform that. There are also two ad hoc committees. One, the nominations committee, which is responsible for filling positions and making recommendations for positions, certain non-appointed positions on the leadership board, as well as other committees, as well as the Notice of Funding Opportunity Committee, which is a committee that is established every single year as we consider how we want to approach our funding ask of HUD and how we want to deploy resources we receive from HUD. On the right, you'll notice that there are our three stakeholders that we continue to engage with. So you see these dotted lines mean that there's a line of influence and back and forth communication, and that's with our Youth Action Board, a Champions Council, which is really honed in and focused on our elected officials and key stakeholders having an opportunity to meet at least twice a year to weigh in on high-level policy recommendations for our homeless system, as well as a Funders Council, which is created to allow for our different funders, the cities and also philanthropic partners, to have an opportunity to meet and discuss how best to leverage and layer different funding streams that are available from the state, from the county, from the federal government. To the left, you see Everyone Home, who is the backbone organization that supports this dotted line really, and it's just for clarity purposes, not a lot of lines going through here, but really supports the leadership board and all of our committees. So we staff all of the committees, as well as ensure that we are bringing in individuals with lived expertise, focusing on centering race equity, as well as convening our nonprofit providers to receive feedback and help inform the work that we're doing collectively. I will let you look at this for a few more moments, and then I'm going to walk us through in the next few slides and give more information about the roles and the responsibilities for each of these committees. I think it best for me to go through the subsequent slides before I pause to get feedback, because you might have your question answered in some of the upcoming slides. Okay, and so this slide is a very detailed slide that outlines the leadership board composition. What you will notice is that there is at least a third of individuals on this board that will be and represent people with lived experience. The leadership board is proposing that at least one of those individuals be a representative from the Youth Action Board. There is a designated seat for the city of Oakland, as well as the city of Berkeley, who also combined with Alameda County to have our continuum of care. So it's really the Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda County continuum of care. So there's appointed seats there. The city of Berkeley will also represent Albany and Emeryville in their representation. And then based on feedback from our cities, small, mid-sized cities, for a desire to ensure that there's representation across our county, there is now 3 new positions that will allow for representatives from the Mid-County, the South County, and the East County. And those positions won't necessarily be elected officials. It might be an elected official or not, but it will be a representative that comes through the Alameda County Conference of Mayors that will sit on behalf of that region, represent that region, providing feedback as well as being a feedback loop to their region in regards to what is occurring with our continuum of care and with everyone home. There's also a number of county representatives on our board. The Healthcare Services Agency, Office of Homeless Care and Coordination Director, as well as a representative from the Social Services Agency, HCD, our Housing and Community Development, as well as the Alameda County Probation. There's a representative from our Public Housing Authority, so elected from the membership, as well as a representative from a nonprofit affordable housing development organization. It's proposed that there will be 4 seats for nonprofit homeless service providers to sit on the board and provide feedback, as well as an advocacy position, also a policy advocacy role, affordable housing advocacy organization, and to ensure that there is continuity and cross-fertilization between our committees, ensuring that there's a representative from the Racial Equity Work Group, as well as that a chair from each of the committees also serve on the leadership board. So again, this is a very large group of representatives that will be weighing in on the decisions that we make for our community. I will share that this is a very comprehensive and large group, but also in looking at other communities, there are communities that have a small group, there's some that have larger groups. This was reflective of really the desire to ensure that our continuum is inclusive and as inclusive as possible with our board. There's also some key takeaways in terms of bold decisions that our leadership board is proposing. Our leadership board is proposing that at least 1/3 of our board, as well as our committees, represent individuals with lived expertise. We're the only community that has such a bold target, and our leadership board is extremely proud of this, moving this recommendation forward. A part of ensuring that we have lived expertise is, in addition to having the seats on these different committees and boards, providing the resources needed to support individuals who will serve in this capacity. So next month, actually, Everyone Home is going to launch an Emerging Leaders Program and bring in individuals with lived experience to provide them with the training and resources and prepare them for engaging in our committees as well as our board, and that will be on an ongoing basis. In addition to, of course, providing stipends and other resources, mentoring, and technology. There's also a bold push from our leadership board to ensure that racial diversity is represented in our board and on our committees. And the decision was made to propose that we look at our point in time counts to set benchmarks so that we can target our recruitment to individuals that reflect our community to serve on our leadership board and on our committees. And so I see that there are some comments in the chat. Before I get into each of these, let me pause to see if there are any questions that won't be addressed at a later time. Okay, great. Thank you, Arlene, and good to see you. And then Nick, I see your question is at-large community member seats. And so let me do a screen share and indicate that as it stands, the seats that are here do not represent just at-large seats on the board. However, our committees do permit and allow, of course, at-large seats. Individuals with lived experience, of course, are here. But if our committees end up having individuals who are at-large, you do see the one seat, number 24, that says advocacy and/or citizen. There's that one seat, but then also there's an opportunity if any individual from the community is on a committee, they could also find themselves chairing and sitting on the leadership board on behalf of that committee as well. And so for the leadership board, and I'll ask my team if there's any questions that are coming up in the chat that you think warrant me pausing before, please let me know.
Chelsea, there's one more question in the chat.
Okay, can you read it to me, Dorcas?
Oh, yes. Arlene asked, are there term limits?
And so for our leadership board, what's being proposed is that they serve 3-year terms, but that there is not currently a proposed term limit. And so I'm open for feedback on that, but the current structure does not have term limits. It does designate for 3 years, but does not indicate that someone can be termed out as it stands. That's a great question. And so our leadership board is responsible for setting the vision, the strategic direction, and the collective goals for our entire homeless response system. As you saw in the depiction, leadership board will delegate work to these different committees, which will ultimately report up to the leadership board. And the leadership board is the group that will be holding the work we do and our work groups accountable to employ different approaches to addressing where we found needs or to ensuring that certain activities actually occur, such as the point in time count. The leadership board will also serve as our HUD Continuum of Care board. And that's a requirement that HUD requires, that we designate a body that will hold that responsibility. This responsibility in our current structure is held by a committee. And so that committee will be dissolved, and instead that responsibility will be held by the HUD Continuum of Care board, also known as our leadership board. The Outreach, Access, and Coordination Committee is the committee that really will hone in on our coordinated entry. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, ultimately it is the space and the place where we as a county ensure that anyone who is finding themselves in need of services are able to gain access to those services. That could be calling 211, it could be going to a navigation center, but ultimately, however you enter into our system, our goal is to ensure that you're met with high quality and targeted support. And so this is the committee that will look at how we deploy resources and how we ensure that we're equitable as well as effective with targeting resources across our system. I'm going to pause. I went through leadership board and outreach, access, and coordination, and ask if there are any questions based on those two groups in our governance. Okay, I'll keep moving. We also have a CLC Standards Compliance and Funding Committee who is responsible for holding and ensuring that our CLC is following our compliance requirements. And so ensuring that we're monitoring, that we're implementing quality improvement, that we're conducting the notice of funding opportunity. And so really just ensuring that we have our HUD compliance requirements ongoing. And we'll be making recommendations to our leadership board if there are any steps that the leadership board needs to take in order to remain in compliance. Our Systems Impact Committee is really a data-driven committee that will combine two committees that we currently have. We currently have an HMIS, that's the Housing Management Information System Committee, that looks at our data and is led by our HMIS lead at the Housing and Community Development Agency, Alameda County's HCD, and really holds the data for our homeless system. That's where we get information in regards to how many beds we have in our system, what our occupancy looks like, and really how long people are remaining homeless. All of that type of data sits in our HMIS system. In addition to HMIS, we currently have a committee that's called the Results-Based Accountability Committee that looks at how our system is performing and does system performance assessments on a quarterly basis and makes recommendations in that space. And so those two committees will come together to form our System Impact Committee. And this committee will be looking at our data, making sure our data is correct and effective in informing us, but ultimately allowing us to get to a point where we're able to make data-informed decisions across our system. The Systems Impact Committee will also help utilize that data to determine what resources we need. And so this goes hand in hand with the gaps analysis. Because this committee will also be full of a lot of data-driven folks, this committee will also help with our methodology for the homeless count, as well as any other role and responsibility that our current HMIS and REBA committees do to support our monitoring and our surveying of our system. Let me pause. I've gone through the COC standards as well as the System Impact Committee and ask if there's any questions about the purpose and the role of these committees. And feel free to put your question in the chat if you have any. And again, once I am complete with the presentation, I will also open up for feedback, comments, as well as questions. Our leadership board is excited to present a new concept to our continuum of care, and that is the creation of a committee focused solely on housing stability and homeless prevention. And so this committee will be a new committee for us and will bring in new stakeholders really to focus in on what do we need to do proactively to really stop the inflow into homelessness and to address those who are experiencing housing instability. And so this committee will focus in on what resources we need, how effective are we with our current diversion programming, as well as take an opportunity and look closely at where the inflow into our homeless system is occurring and bring together those cross-sector organizations that could help us work together to prevent new homelessness in our community. Another new addition to our continuum of care is the Housing Capacity Committee. And this is a committee that will focus in on how do we create a bigger supply that we all know and recognize the biggest challenge, and that is having affordable housing in our community. And so thinking through affordable housing, not just brick and mortar, but also subsidies. How do we acquire more funding for affordable housing? How do we advocate and attract new developers and projects to occur? And really also looking across our county to create a pipeline where we know when and how much affordable housing we anticipate coming into our system, and planning proactively to apply for and receive funding for expansion opportunities. And so I'll pause. I've gone through 2 new committees that would be added to our governance, and that includes homelessness prevention and housing capacity. And pause and ask if there's any questions here.
This might be a little too technical, but with the housing capacity committee or group, what's their ability to sort of, in terms of so it says to advocate, what's their ability to sort of be politically active? Like, is it a 501c3? Like, how, I'm wondering, like, what are the rules around that, and what's their ability to sort of like organize communities? Does that make sense?
No, that's a great question. And I think, you know, our organization has in the past been able to help support letters, support initiatives, engage and bring in and speak on behalf of our continuum to different funders in regards to these needs. But to be clear, our organization, the current structure, does not permit us to hold the role of being a lobbyist, a true lobbyist in that sense at this time. And I like your question, Sharon, because there is a possibility of adding that designation. It's a C4 designation that would allow us to actually do more in the advocacy space, but we are able to promote our ideals and try to bring in individuals who could also help do that on our behalf as well. And I see our board chair, Mo Wright. Thanks, of course, for coming off of mute here. I defer for your additional input.
Yeah, so we have partnered with C4s in political campaigns, you know, because we have so much information and contacts and so on, for bond measures as well as sales tax measures. So, you know, there are ways to do it, and it's something that we look for opportunities.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. All right. Are there any other questions? I can't see the chat. So I ask Katie or Dorcas if you see anything that you think I should read out, or you want to read out to me, please let me know.
I think there was a comment. Arlene said employment and training, but I didn't catch if she's referring to which slide. Arlene, I don't know if you want to explain more.
Well, I was wondering, I went to a CERF listening session for ESierra yesterday, and this money that's coming down the pipeline, and you know, I'm all about workforce development and training, because I think that is part of the key for homeless prevention. And so I was wondering about the collaborations. One thing that they did not have in their on their pipeline was their focus was not on anything homeless. And I found it really interesting that this $600 million that's going to be coming through California, there's no inclusion for this population. And so that just really struck a chord, and it just doesn't seem to be collaboration. I looked up in Oakland just to see if there's any kind of mention, and there is no mention, but I know that that is a key to bringing homeless prevention and bringing people out of the need to kind of lean on the subsidies.
Excellent point, Arlene, and I think underscores the reason and the need for this type of committee that we have not had before in our continuum. So this committee's goal is to bring together all of these other key stakeholders So committee members and public members such as yourself would be making those types of recommendations in regards to other partners that we need to bring in to collaborate more effectively. Also SSA, our Social Security Administration office, also works with workforce development and would be a key partner on this committee as well, thinking about how we address that employment and economic viability question that's ongoing as well. But
Especially
this
with
is
the, especially with this recovery, the funds that's coming through and already the capital improvements that's going on, that's already in the pipeline, but those that are going to be coming up in the future, and how do we include our population in those numbers, because that's ultimately the agenda. You want to bring people out of where they are. And so, you know, that's been a real, you know, that's been my advocacy. You know me, Chelsea, but anyway.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And I think what you're saying is spot on to why we need to bring this group together, and we need to be more thoughtful, and we need new stakeholders and partnerships. And so that's the goal with the creation of this committee, identifying those opportunities and those blind spots, thinking about how we leverage the different resources that go to these different current sectors and how we bring them together more meaningfully. So thank you for raising that, Arlene. I mentioned, and you saw in the organizational chart, this race equity work group that will help support all of the work we're doing. And so they will help in the creation and the development of a racial equity action plan. They're going to assist with setting the racial equity metrics and a monitoring process across our system, looking at our point in time count and ensuring that we have the diversity represented on our board and help to guide and give recommendations on how we recruit. Also looking at and ensuring that we're maintaining that diversity and providing ongoing reports to our leadership board as it pertains to this, the work we're doing. This is not to say that the centering race equity is not also embedded, because it absolutely is, into each of the committees. And so each of the committees will also have their own data metrics that they will be monitoring, but this group will help inform as well as help ensure that we're holding ourselves accountable in that way. And so one thing I want to mention that I did not have in our slides is that each of these committees will comprise of between 11 to 13 individuals, and that there are no set designated appointed seats for those committees. So of the 5 committees, you could imagine we are having at least up to 55 new members in our community engaged in these different areas. Of course, ensuring that we have individuals representing those with lived experience. But there will be an opportunity for us to get feedback in this session, as well as for you to provide written feedback. And then ultimately for us to come to the community on February 2nd for vote. And after that, we will have a plan and time frame for elections, for staffing, and the goal is to fully operationalize and launch this new governance by the summer of this year. I do want to just highlight and encourage, if you haven't had an opportunity, the full governance charter that's being proposed is on our website. It is still kind of fluid, because as we receive feedback, especially some of the semantics, wording changes, non-substantive changes, we're fine-tuning those things, of course. But then our leadership board is also meeting tomorrow to take into account the feedback we received from today's session, as well as other feedback. And ultimately, the goal is for us to have at our community meeting on February 2nd, the community support for this new structure. And so I do want to encourage you to look at the website also to, if you have not done so already, sign up on our everyonehome.org/connect so that you can be informed when we're recruiting committee members, when we're convening various community events, as well as if you're interested in supporting the work we do monetarily through donations. And so with that, I will pause and go off of Spotlight and allow for an opportunity to thank you for you all to ask questions. And so let me open the floor. And or provide comments. Questions or comments are welcome. Sharon?
Yeah, I didn't want to jump in, but yeah, if no one else has something. I really like the combining of the results-based accountability and the HMIS committee. I think to me that I forget the new name, but
System impact, yes.
Oh, thank you, system impact. To me, that makes a lot of sense just based on my experience in results-based accountability committees. So I really like that. I think that's good. A question I had, and you did speak to this a little bit, that, you know, even though there will now be a racial equity focus group, that other committees will still be focusing on that. I guess it does seem like there's a little bit of a risk there that other committees will say, well, this other group is working on that, so we don't have to, or, you know, that's not our focus anymore. And I guess I'm wondering, are there systemic things to put in place to just make sure that all the other groups are also focusing on that, since that is overall for us as a county a really, you know, one of the top priorities right now?
Excellent question. In fact, one of the things, this race equity work group, the thought, and we brought in a consultant to help us kind of build out the governance as we were centering diversity and race equity. One of the thoughts was that this group will actually dissolve in time, and that it will stand up initially to help create what metrics we need to be following in each of these committees. So they will be working on and providing recommendations to each of the committees in regards to the different metrics that should be followed and evaluated. And I hear you loud and clear, because that was one of the key things that actually our consultants warned against in terms of too heavily relying on that group. So instead, one of the key things they'll be focused on is how do we make this a part of our day-to-day and ensure that it's embedded in each of the committees. So thank you for raising that.
That's exciting then, because I do, like, I think it has felt like, I mean, I think we all agreed that that was such a huge priority a few years ago, and it has felt like we've been sort of slow to get momentum. So I'm excited to hear that from you. That sounds like that has a lot of promise in actually integrating that focus into the work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see if there are any other questions.
Hello.
Hi, Emma.
Hi there. This is Emma from Supervisor Carson's office. I just wanted to, you know, drop in to hear the presentation. So I just wanted to know, so what does the staffing look like for is it just kind of similar to the other ones, other committees, but what does the staffing look like behind these committees?
Excellent question. In fact, our leadership board will be meeting to talk about and to create a work group to focus in on how do we staff and how do we have the resources to staff all of these new committees. I will share that certain committees, for example, system impact, there will be a county liaison helping to meet with the chairs and ensuring that there's certain things that are reported on a consistent basis. Our HICSA helped to co-staff the Outreach Access and Coordination Committee, because they handle our coordinated entry and they are a management entity. However, just the day-to-day staffing of these committees, currently everyone home backbone organization is understaffed to support this new structure. And so a big part of what we'll have to figure out is how do we ensure that we're able to create the prevention committee and the capacity committee and support that ongoing work. So thanks for asking the question, Emma. There is definitely interest and thought about how will we address that funding need so that we can hold up these committees that we've created. I do want to just take a moment and give a plug as well to the work that we've done. It's not, I'm not being biased when I say, because it came from a non-biased source, that we are ahead of the nation and ahead of the curve in regards to how we are thinking about operationalizing our work and bringing everyone together. So as one of the face recognitions for our work, I will say that I constantly receive reach outs from our peers around the nation asking about how are we getting ready to have a third of individuals with lived experience, or what will we be doing with our prevention committee. I've been asked to participate and speak at the upcoming NAEH conference because of interest in the work that we're doing. And so want to give a huge kudos to our leadership board, but also to our community, because the leadership board is being responsive to what we're hearing and really trying to put forth a plan to reflect what our community needs. And so all eyes are on us to pull this off in a great way, and I'm really looking forward to the ongoing support from you all as we move forward in this work. Let's see. And so now that my commercial kudos, did any questions come in? Okay, don't see any. Nick, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, hi. I do have a kind of question, comment. The leadership board, the directives are all HUD centered, and one of the real world tensions that we have as a community is how to meet the HUD mandates alongside the expanding larger community mandates that we have to meet just based on the sheer magnitude of the crisis that we have. So to tie back to the function about gap analysis, what's the room for, like, what are the thoughts, discussions, conversations you've had in terms of bridging, how you approach bridging that gap moving forward at the high level as well?
Great question, Nick. And in fact, I'm glad you said that, because the truth is our leadership board has been very clear that they want to make sure that it is not only focused on HUD CLC compliance requirements. In fact, there are many other, the comeback plan, HAP funding, other resources, county funding that the leadership board will be working together to set policy recommendations on, ensure our compliance, ensure that we're in the best posture to get as much of the funding for. And so it is beyond just the HUD CLC mandated work and requirements. And so but there is a committee, and we want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. There will still be a committee focused on CLC compliance to ensure we meet that HUD compliance. That's about $43 million. But our overall system and our needs is something that the leadership board will be looking at collectively in a much broader way. And hopefully that answered the question. I think, of course, it will be guided, the leadership board will be guided by feedback and recommendations that also come through each of the committees in regards to other areas that our system needs to respond to and address. But it's bigger than just the CO, than the HUD designated COC.
And then my last question would be, Chelsea, what are your general thoughts in terms of rollout? Is this like we vote and then tomorrow we're on new committees simultaneously at once, or are some committees going to get a softer rollout, just generally?
Great question. As it stands, each of our committee chairs and at least 5 of our leadership board members are going to convene and meet on an ongoing basis as a transition work group. And that group will come up with what the strategy and the rollout plan should be. But you can imagine that over the next 6 months, steps such as staffing up a nominations committee will probably be one of the first things, because that committee needs to help recruit and interview potential candidates to serve on these committees. There'll probably be an assessment in regards to if there's additional resources needed to staff certain committees and at what point those committees should transition. Each of our committees have been asked to create, our current committees have been asked to create work plans for the year as if their work was going to continue through the course of the year, because that work still needs to happen. And so the transition committee will also have to work on at what stage do we transition this committee and evolve it and collapse it with the other. One thing I know is already our HMIS and REBA committee have discussed meeting together, right? And so to the extent that some of these committees where we realize that there is going to be synergies can begin to start moving in that direction as well. But I don't believe that we'll be at full launch until the summer, because one of the key things we want to make sure is that our leadership board is fully seated, that we have 1/3 of individuals with lived experience at the table to make sure that we're also moving forward with policy recommendations based on this new group that we've identified as being the best diverse representation of our county and our community. All right. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, I am first of all, thank you so very much for giving your time with us today, for participating with us. We're going to deploy a poll to kind of get a read from you all in regards to if this seems like it's going in the right direction, where you would land when this comes to our community for vote in February. And I and the team are also going to hang tight until the session ends, just in case someone joins late. And then if you know anyone who wanted to attend but didn't get a chance to attend, let them know that the materials and the video will also be made available on our website. So comment period is still open. If you have thoughts or questions or comments that you want to share, please don't hesitate. Our comment period closes next Wednesday on the 26th. And so thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone please stay safe and let's launch the poll. Thank you. Oh, okay, got it. I think, and so I'm seeing the feedback. I'm also getting some personal notes related to some of the feedback. So thanks for letting me know if you hit the wrong button. And also, thanks for your feedback. It looks like that we are at a good point where at least half, if not a third of you will believe that you would support the work that we're doing and the direction we're headed. And it does also appear, I think that the individual who let me know they hit the wrong button cannot support. So I would suspect that letting me know that means that there is some support. But I do also see, thank you, that there is some hesitancy by someone in the group. And I would just encourage you to either stay on and share some of your thoughts and feedback on how we can improve to get you to a point of comfort, or answer any questions you might have, and or send in comments. We really want to get this right. We really want to get as much engagement and support. The other thing that I will share is that reviewing our governance is in our bylaws to occur every year. So we will always have an opportunity to continue to hone and improve how we're engaging along the way. And quite frankly, at any point we decide that we need to make a modification, we don't have to wait a full year. So we're really just trying to orient ourselves in a way that allows us to be as effective and as efficient as possible in our work. And so thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you for the work that you do and continue to do, and your support for the work that we're doing. And so again, please stay safe, and thanks for joining us.